At the end of the day, she said this is going to happen. So, okay, you take an 18-year-old kid getting ready to graduate high school, and all the things I had planned and was going to do, right? And the thing is, Lauren, none of it happened. See, I immediately had depression, anxiety, shame, confusion. If somebody would have sat down and said, young man, you look upset, but you can save your baby. You can provide for your baby. Even though you didn't have an example of how to be a dad, you can find that example. You can find a mentor. God loves you right now in this moment, no matter, you know what I mean? At that level of encouragement, I think a lot of men would jump out of their car in the parking lot, spring up off that step, and go run in and beg for the life of their child.
Well, howdy, everyone, and welcome to the Lauren Musica Show. I'm your host, Lauren Musica, attorney and president CEO of Sidewalk Advocates for Life. In the movement to defend life and family, if you know me at all, you know that I treasure not just women's voices, but men's too. Because when it comes to this cause, it is so important we remember that every child we've ever known has had both what? A mother and a father. The men I know in this movement are our protectors and defenders, true heroes of our cause. And they often have their own story or even testimony in the battle for life and an important perspective to share as a man affected by abortion. And one of those leaders on the front lines is Greg Mayo. He's here today not only to share his testimony, but his vitally important perspective on the best approach to take if you're reaching out to someone entering an abortion facility and beyond. I cannot wait for you to hear from him today. So let me go ahead and give him a proper introduction. Greg Mayo is the award-winning author of Almost Daddy, The Forgotten Story, and its companion 12-step recovery guide. He spent more than 20 years helping men find hope, healing, and a renewed relationship with God. Through speaking, events, and media, Greg has reached over 1 million people with a message that's raw, real, and redemptive. His honest storytelling, humor, and heart connect deeply with audiences everywhere. Let's go ahead and welcome to the program, Greg. Hey, Greg. Great to have you. How are you doing?
I'm great, Lauren. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Such a blessing. All right. Well, I'm going to jump right in here. In your talks and interviews, you often say that abortion is the middle of the story. Can you unpack that for us for a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of times in the pro-life world, we get wrapped up in that moment, right? The moment of the unplanned pregnancy, or whether they're abortion minded or maybe even abortion wounded. But it's important to note that these men and women have a story long before they got to the unplanned pregnancy crossroads. So
Yeah.
there's other things going on, childhood issues, abandonment. And I'll give you an example, Lauren. 71% of unplanned pregnancies, teen pregnancies, happen in a fatherless home. So
Yeah.
when we're talking to this young man or this young woman, we have to address or at least be mindful of those issues that are happening long before they got to us, right? So we have a little more compassion, maybe a little more understanding.
Yeah. Oh, that so makes sense. I know that when I've met somebody on the sidewalk, right, I remind myself that I'm the stranger entering their story. And also, what an honor, what an opportunity to serve them right there at that critical moment. And that can affect their path going forward. So, speaking of, I would love to hear for you how abortion loss informed your decisions and your path going forward unhealed.
That's a great question. I was an 18-year-old kid. I was toward the end of my
Mhm.
senior year of high school. And the girl's mom actually is the one that told me that she was pregnant and going to have an abortion. And,
Yeah.
I protested, but at the end of the day, she said this is going to happen. So, okay, you take an 18-year-old kid getting ready to graduate high school, and all the things I had planned and was going to do, right? And the thing is, Lauren, none of it happened. See, I immediately had depression, anxiety, shame, confusion, anger, all these things that I didn't have a name for back then. And they informed decisions, kind of like emotional whack a mole. You do anything to avoid whatever's happening next. So instead
Yeah.
of going to college, I drifted. For 4 years, I traveled around the country, worked different jobs, um, which led to at 22, me being in Western Nebraska working construction because nothing says fun like Western Nebraska and construction. But and I had a second abortion story, and people
Mm,
ask me when I speak at churches, "Well, don't you know how that happened?" And well, yeah, but I was
yeah,
running that state of heightened anxiety, right? That confusion.
yeah,
You're literally playing life on defense. You're just moving to the next thing because what you're doing as a man is dodging the feelings you don't have a name for, if that makes any sense
yeah.
at all.
Yeah, no, it makes a ton of sense. Yeah. And I know especially for men, women do this too, right? It's hard to sit in those feelings and face that pain and like you said, put a name on it and begin to process that. Today there seems to be little but growing awareness of how abortion impacts the fathers of unborn children. So I'd love to hear when and how you found healing.
Well, the glorious redemption part of that is I found healing, right?
Mm,
But the sad part of it is it took 21 years from the first abortion
wow.
experience. Now, I was already healing from other stuff, and this is where it gets a little confusing, even for me. I had an alcoholic father, which by the grace of God was sober 46 years when he died a couple of years ago. But
Mm,
I was working through those issues and abandonment and all the things, but I
yeah.
just couldn't quite get it right. I always felt like there was something just not right. And then I was 39 years old and I was doing a book study at my church um, with a group of men, and I was leading the study. The book had nothing to do with abortion, didn't even say the word.
Yeah.
But at some point, this voice in my head said, "Hey, share your abortion story." I believe that voice was the Holy Spirit. And I said,
Mm,
"No, I'm sure not." And the voice said it again. And I'm arguing, right, with the Holy Spirit in my head. I'm like, dude, look, I know these guys. I go to church with these guys. They don't talk about abortion. I'm not doing this. But I
yeah.
finally acquiesced. And here's the thing, Lauren. Here's where the moment changed for me. I shared my story through trembling hands and a shaky voice and all that. And by the time I locked the doors of the church that night, three other men had shared their stories for the first time.
Wow. Isn't that
And
awesome?
that was the moment. I was so excited driving home. Um, I called my pastor the next morning. We had coffee. There wasn't a lot out there for men, right? But I started ordering books, and I met with him every week. I met with a counselor every week, a Christian counselor, and so that was the beginning of it for me. But that 22-minute drive home, the excitement of I finally had a name for it, right? I finally
Yeah.
had something I could ground it to. And I'll tell you something else. Let me just real quick rotate back to when I was 24 years old. I was in therapy.
Yeah.
And about our eighth or ninth session, I told the therapist about the abortion stuff, the two abortion experiences. And he kind of leaned back, and I'll never forget this. He goes, that's not, I don't think that's really a thing. Tell me more about your dad.
Hmm.
So I hope he's not practicing anymore. But that level of emotional invalidation, I think is important to mention because I think a lot of men experience that.
Yeah. Yeah. I know I just had Sean Corcoran from Men for Life on the show, and that really was a crux thing for him is the invalidation, in his own story. People telling his girlfriend, "Oh, of course you feel this way," but almost like he didn't have a place in this. He didn't have a right to feel what he did. And yet, I know
Right.
I've experienced this directly on the sidewalk, even immediately, that some of my most powerful conversations have been with fathers. Men are affected by this. Well, why do you think that society tries to downplay this for men? Like, what is your thinking around that?
Well, because the people controlling the narrative are not pro life.
Yeah.
And so what has to happen in order to push the agenda of abortion, I'm just going to call it plainly what it is, and destroy
Yeah.
families, what has to happen is we have to take the man out in whatever way possible.
Mm,
I mean, and we don't have time to go into it today, but my gosh, look at the cultural messaging in the
yeah.
movies. Show me one movie that has an unplanned pregnancy situation or abortion situation where the man is a strong, righteous leader.
Yeah.
You're not going to find it. And so, men, because we're men, I mean, guys, we know our tribe because we quote the same movies, right? Um, and so when you look to media and you see nothing that validates your opinion or your feeling or that you even get to have a feeling, then eventually you start believing the lie. And after a couple of generations, the lie becomes the truth. And I think that's where we're at now, which is why people doing what I'm doing and what Sean's doing, men out there speaking about it, look, this really hurt me. And this is how
Yeah.
I had to go through whatever I had to go through to heal. I think that's why it's so important. And we need millions of more men doing that.
Yeah, yeah. And by you speaking, you're setting other men free, or at least giving them permission to feel this God-given right to recognize that loss and to tell their stories, and as more people tell their stories, they set more people free and more people free. And at the end of the day, what it comes down to is we're able to bring more people to the healing and redemption that we all have in Jesus Christ, that's just waiting for us. And that's what's just so beautiful about this is that really was what was going on here is it's not just, hey, I just want to share this story, but I want to tell you about the God who changed my life. I want to tell
Yep.
you about how everything changed when he came into my life. And oh, it's so amazing. That's what I hear in all these healing stories is that God is up to something so magnificent always, calling us home to him and to the abundant life. So good. Um, I want to go back for a second because this is especially relevant to the part of our audience who serve as sidewalk advocates or serving moms and dads on the sidewalk and trying to do the most effective thing to reach their hearts. Um, you said, and you mentioned this, you alluded to this in your book, you protested the abortion when you were in high school. You went to the abortion facility, though, with her anyway. So, what was that experience like? Like, tell us what it was like to be there that day.
It was horrifying and
Yeah.
numbing and confusing. I don't remember. I was thinking about this yesterday, knowing we were going to talk today, and I don't remember the drive over there. And it's clean on the other
Hmm.
side of Indianapolis from where I live. But I remember the walk across the parking lot with her and her
Yeah.
mom. I remember walking in, and I was inside about 7 seconds, right? And they asked me to wait outside. And it was a
Hmm.
fairly chilly April morning. And so I sat on the steps, and I can remember that's when I started drifting into kind of numbness, right? Because
Yeah.
I couldn't process what was happening. I didn't understand why my feelings were betrayed by what I was being told by her mom and a couple other people. And so imagine this state of confusion, and I feel like I'm supposed to like do something. She's in there. And
Yeah.
even though I didn't have the right foundational knowledge or whatever you want to call it, something told me from the very moment I found out she was pregnant that that was my baby already. And
Yeah.
so there I sat. Now, I have to share this part. I have to share this part. I look out, and earlier that day, or maybe the day before, there had been a protest at the clinic. And there were, I recount this in the novel as part of Ben's story, but this part really actually happened. There was poster boards, and they said stuff like burn in hell and
Yeah.
baby killer. Excuse me. One of them had a picture of a mangled fetus on it, like, this big.
Wow.
Now imagine me, this young guy, sitting there confused, whatever. I already had bad churching growing up, right?
Yeah.
And I looked over and I saw those poster boards, and I immediately thought, oh, yep, that's those Christians from grandma's church. Got it. Stay away from those people.
Yeah.
It was a part of, and like we said at the beginning, abortion's the middle of the story. So it's not all attributed to that, but it really is a part of the reason I stayed separated from God for so long.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and it was, well, I'm trying not to overstate it, but the reality is it was a soul crushing experience seeing that.
Yeah. And I wonder if when you saw all that, it was like, if that is who God is, especially in this moment of crisis for myself, I don't want any part of that right now, you
Right.
know? A message of condemnation rather than an invitation to the abundant life, which is really what it is, right? Um, I can't imagine how hard that was, that if that's supposed to be the lifeline, if that's supposed to be our safe place and our cradle, and these people don't seem safe, and their messages are angry and they're already calling you names and, you know, how are you supposed to feel like that's any sort of refuge for you? Like, it makes sense to me.
Right. And that's
Yeah.
probably why, in a study done 2 or 3 years ago of men impacted by abortion, the respondents said only 7% of them said they would go to a clergy member to talk about abortion healing.
Hmm.
Only seven. The
Wow.
place that Christ established for the broken to go and receive healing and redemption, only 7% of the people said they would go there.
Wow. Wow. How do you think we change all of that? And I mean, I guess that also begs the next question that I was going to ask, which is the best way to approach people on the sidewalk who are hurting and in crisis from your
Well,
vantage point.
so let
Yeah.
me answer that in two ways. When my novel came out, a pastor friend of mine read it, and we were having coffee talking about it one day, and he said, "Let me ask you a question. Protest outside abortion clinics, you think that's right or wrong?" And I said,
Hmm.
"Well, let me turn that question back to you. Is it working?"
Hmm.
He didn't answer for a long moment. I said, "Let me say it another way. If your goal is to save babies, if your goal is to restore and help young men and young women in those situations find a pathway through God and through a godly marriage, family, all the things, is protesting reaching that goal?"
Yeah.
And he said, after a few minutes of silence, he looked at me and said, "I'm going to have to get back to you on that." Right. Because it's not effective. It doesn't
Yeah.
work. It doesn't save anybody. In fact, what it does is pile on toxic shame. And then the other part to
Mm.
that answer, and I get asked this all the time, if somebody would have came up to you when you were sitting on those steps, right when I sat down the steps, say some man or woman walked up to me, a counselor, a prayer warrior, not a protester, and sat down, what could they have said to change the situation? What could they have said to make me jump up and run in there and try and beg her to leave? And the short answer, Lauren, is anything truly of God and encouraging. In other words, if somebody would have sat
Yeah.
down and said, "Young man, you look upset, but you can save your baby. You can provide for your baby. Even though you didn't have an example of how to be a dad, you can find that example. You can find a mentor. God loves you right now in this moment, no matter, you know what I mean? That level of
Yeah.
encouragement, I think a lot of men would jump out of their car in the parking lot, spring up off that step, and go run in and beg for the life of their child.
Yeah. Yeah. So right on. One of the things we teach in the Sidewalk Advocates for Life training is that you will hear other people in the community, not always, but sometimes, and they will be going at these men rather than coming alongside them,
Mm-hmm.
railing at them. You have blood on your hands. You drove her here. You're an accomplice. You're just as good, all these things, right? And what we teach is to recognize that that man has a calling to be a protector and defender and a hero for her and the child that day, and to speak to that instead, and to call him into the possibility that he can go in there and maybe change the game. And even when we have women who are digging in their heels, I mean, it's very true. We have to send some men in there 3 and 4 times before she knows that he's serious, right? But even if she continues to dig into her heels and ultimately have the abortion, what I've told men is you will never regret doing what you can, right? You
Mm-hmm.
will at least have the peace of I tried, right? And it's such a different approach. It's such a different approach. I can't think of really any instance when we're trying to win hearts and minds, we're coming at someone, calling them names, approaching them in anger. This does not work. But coming alongside someone and saying, "Hey, I see you. I'm a broken person just trying to figure this out like you are. And I just know that you have something inside you right now that she needs, that your child needs. And um, I'm going to be right here cheering you on when you go in there and you try again and you try again." There's
Yep.
just that's a whole different ball game, right?
Yeah, well, what you just said is, from what I can tell from my reading of the Gospels, is how Jesus approached every broken person he helped and healed. The woman at the
Yeah.
well, Zacchaeus, the guy waiting to get in the pool, example after example. That's how he
Yeah.
approached it. Um,
Yeah.
and so, if we truly claim to be Christians, if we truly claim to want people restored to God, why do we not approach people like that in that situation?
Right.
Why do we
Right.
draw a line and say they're evil, not look at them through Christ's eyes? They're broken and wounded and they need our help.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. And one of the gentlemen on our board, Nate, he's a licensed pastor. And one of the things he reminds so many of us of is that when we're tempted to point to the story, because this is what happens when people talk about abortion and even going to the sidewalk, is the first story that comes to mind is the money changers in the temple. That, oh, well, Jesus came in, guns a blazing, and he flipped those tables over and he told them what was up, right? And Nate reminds people, you know what? He did that with religious people. He did that with people who purported to serve in his name, right? He was calling them to a higher standard, to the very standard that they were saying that they should be held to, ironically. But people who were in crisis, people who are hurting, Jesus always approached them with an invitation to love,
Yep.
with recognizing that, yes, they were called to not continue in that sin. And he did bring that up, but he never went at people. He always came alongside them. And he identified the beauty within them and who they were in God's image and likeness, and that they were called to something greater. And I just think that that's so instructive for those of us who serve people at the abortion facility, because nobody is going into an abortion facility, skipping and going, "Oh, I think I'll have an abortion today," right? Like you said, abortion is a trauma response. There's
Right.
always something more going on there, right?
Yeah, it's a permanent solution to a temporary problem. The temporary
Yeah.
problem being the unplanned pregnancy that I'm not ready for. But you
Right.
make it, and that's the thing that haunted me for years, Lauren, is it was the permanence of the thing. From the
Yeah.
moment we drove home from that abortion clinic, I'm like, I can't. This is done. I can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
So what if, like you're saying, what if we met them where they're at without judgment, but with love, and found out what
Yeah.
they really need? And because of what I do, the work I do now, I talk to young abortion-minded men, um,
Yeah.
and the conversation within a few minutes, I find out what they're really scared about, and it's
Yeah.
usually I don't know how to be a dad, I can't afford a family, and so we work through a solution, we work through a path to get them some help, whatever that looks like, right? There are a lot of organizations starting to do great work with this, but if they're worried about being able to afford it, hook them up in a trade program, right?
Yeah.
Hook them up with the local church that has older men that'll mentor them. It's our job. John Eldridge talks in his book Fathered by God about men when they get to like my stage of life. I'm 55. All my sons are adults now, and how your job mentoring and raising men isn't over
Mm.
yet. It's time to
Yeah.
reach out to those fatherless men inside your church and community, and not
Yep.
go play golf 3 times a week, right? There's work God has for us. There's wisdom you gain over time.
Mm.
And hopefully I'll get more in a few weeks, but you gain wisdom over time, and so you're obligated to turn that back to young men, to go be a sidewalk counselor, to go stand outside that clinic and be a loving, masculine voice to these guys who are scared to death and have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and like we talked, all many of which don't think they have a voice to begin with, but they need that encouragement.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think you're onto something. And I think this is a perfect commercial for so many of the men who are listening to this. We need you on the sidewalk. Should you feel called to come join us, right? I think a lot of times people look at sidewalk advocacy, sidewalk counseling, and they say, oh, that's for women. Women, that's a woman's thing, women are walking in there. But again, I think we're just feeding into that old narrative that abortion just primarily affects women. And understandably, yes, she's carrying the child. Of course, there's a special um note there that abortion is going to affect her in a very specific way. as the one who's carrying that child. But I can tell you, after having spent over 20 years on the sidewalk, we need men out there to minister to the men because we see it with their own eyes. They are affected by this, you know? Um,
Can can
one,
I share something about
yeah,
that?
sure.
This is somewhat anecdotal, but a lot of other guys have noticed it too. I speak at a lot of pro-life conferences,
Yeah.
and here's what I need to share about this. There are 90% women in attendance at these conferences and about 10%
Mm,
men.
mm,
Men in the pro-life world. But at banquets, when I speak at PRC fundraiser banquets, which I do several a year, then it's about half and half. So I guess what I want to say about that, Lauren, is you're right. We need more men out on the sidewalks because right now in the pro-life world, men are comfortable writing the checks and sending their women off to fight the battle. Right?
mm. Oof.
We
Yeah.
need men on the front lines. We need strong, loving, masculine men to stand there outside that clinic to pray, to offer counseling, support, guidance, hope, the whole thing. Anyway,
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
felt
Absolutely. Absolutely. I will take that commercial as the day is long. That's awesome. That's awesome. And sure, there may be men who are listening to this and they're like, man, I don't know. I might feel called to do something different. And that's okay. I find that the pro-life movement is like the body of Christ. We have the hand and the foot and the mouth
mhm,
and all the things. And you may be called to another part of the movement, and that's okay. This is the greatest human rights movement on earth. We have everything from education to undercover investigative journalism to prayer and outreach and everything in between. My admonition to anyone listening to this is find your place in the greatest human rights movement on earth. I mean,
mhm,
aside from a faith conversation, this is the greatest conversation in America, in our world today. And the sidewalk in front of your local abortion facility is the greatest crossroads of life and death in our world today, if we know abortion to be what it is, right? So I just encourage everybody to remember you have a voice in this battle that's indispensable. There are people that you can reach that I cannot reach, and we need you. We need you to discern this, right? Tell us a little bit more about your novel that you wrote
well, I
and why
wrote
a
it.
novel.
Well,
Yeah.
I get asked that a lot. My dad, when I first started writing it, my dad said, "You're not writing a memoir, are you?" I said, "No." He said, "Good, you're not famous enough."
It's kind of how
My dad
you,
was
you
terrific.
get famous through
Um,
that, maybe. Come on, Dad.
but I wrote Almost Daddy, frankly, because silence destroys people.
Mm,
21 years, Lauren, I suffered in
wow.
silence. And our culture doesn't really talk about what abortion does to men, not in
Hmm.
novels, not in movies, not in TV shows, but it absolutely needs to. And I thought, well, nobody else is
Amen.
doing it, so I'm gonna. And I didn't hide the message in like slogans and statistics and all that. I wrote a very real, very honest story of loss and the pain that follows it, but also a very honest story of grace. Um, how
Yeah.
a man can be broken by lost fatherhood and abortion, but still find hope, healing, and restore relationship with God. Because for a long time, I didn't think I'd ever find restored relationship with God. So my hope in writing it was to give men a voice, to let women understand what men go through, and ultimately to start the conversation and to break the silence for men, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
That was a mouthful. I'm sorry.
Absolutely. I love it. No, and I know that when I picked it up, I thought you were going to be talking directly to the person reading the book. What I really loved, what was so unique about it, is you wrote it actually from more of a third person vantage point, right? Like you
Mhm.
you you told a whole story and then added commentary at the end, and it was riveting. Like it's hard to put down. Um, and so I guess my question is like each one of those major moments in the story, that's your story, right?
Yeah. So the best way I can explain it is a lot of my stories sprinkled in there because I
Yeah.
had to write. I knew I wanted to write a novel, but I wanted it to feel authentic, and I knew what my feelings were. Um,
Yeah.
but like everywhere Ben lives in the book, I lived at one point in my life,
Yeah.
but it all didn't happen in that way. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I did what writers do. I wrote what I know, and
Yeah.
um, but I didn't want to tell it in first person. I didn't want Ben
Mm.
telling you his story. I wanted sort of an outside observer, telling the story, because next I'll be writing Abby's story, the other main character in the book.
Mm.
And I'll tell you something about how I got those names. When I went through abortion healing, and some people disagree, but I believe it's important to name your children.
Yeah.
And God showed me that the first child was a girl, and so I named her Abigail after Abigail Adams, like the coolest woman in American history. And then the second child I named Ben after Benjamin Franklin. Had I finished
Mm.
college, I would have been a history teacher. That I I love them both, but so it felt like the right way to tell the story. And like I said earlier, guys connect with story. Jesus used
Yeah,
story, right?
that's right.
And so I thought, well, that's how I'll do it. And earlier we were joking about um, the pronunciation of my last name being Mayo, whatever. Um, it's actually the novel's actually available in Spanish now.
Oh, wow.
I trained a bunch of priests on using the 12 steps for post-abortion healing down in Florida a few years ago, and one of them was from Miami, and he asked me if it was available in Spanish, and I said no, but I can make it so. And he said, good, I could really use it. So I found a translator, and I tell people all the time I don't read Spanish, so it might be a repair manual for an 85 Chevy. I don't know, but I'm pretty sure it's a novel.
That's awesome. Oh my goodness. So 2 languages now, English and Spanish, and people can get it off a Kindle or, wherever they get books, right?
Yep, Kindle, Amazon. It's in Audible, so it's an audiobook format now. I went in studio and did that a few months ago.
Wow.
It's on my website on almostdaddy.com. And next year, because I work with a pregnancy center in Austria, next year it'll be in German
Mhm.
too.
No kidding. Wow, how
I don't speak that
beautiful.
either.
That's amazing. Oh, wow, congratulations. That's awesome. Um, if someone's listening to this, Greg, and they're in need of healing, what would you say to them as the first step?
The first step's the first step. Tell somebody you
Mm,
trust. Like, don't tell the guy at the gas station, ringing up your soda pop. A pastor, a friend. If you're married, tell your spouse, if you haven't
mm,
already. I was very fortunate. For whatever reason, I told my wife on our first date about my
wow.
abortion. I don't know why, but it made it easier later when I got in touch with it. But yeah, so the first step is to have that conversation. You can go to a meeting, you can go online, and there are a lot of different places that have talk lines where you can at least talk to somebody. Um, but the first step is to have a conversation. The Bible tells us, confess your sins one to another and you shall be healed. So start that conversation with a
Yeah,
godly person that you trust. And then listen to the prompting and the leading of the Holy Spirit, whether it's a group at your church, whether it's a Celebrate Recovery, which is a 12-step group for your listeners that aren't aware, Christian based, whether it's a men's study, whether it's a virtual group, whatever, but just have that conversation. And as
yeah,
messy and as unkempt and as chaotic as it's going to come out the first time, have the conversation. Allow
yeah,
Christ to lift that burden and put something else in its place. That's the first
yeah.
step.
That's awesome. And I would guess you're a great proponent of good Christian counseling or finding a support group at church. I know a lot of our churches have these, right? So if you're looking then for the next step after that, after sharing that with somebody, what programs are out there that people can partake of to really continue the healing journey?
Well, there's a lot of them, and some of them are really terrific. I
Yeah.
know CareNet, for example, they have a men's healing program.
Mm,
SaveOne.org, Sheila and Jack Harper. When I was going through, and back then I read every book on men and
mm.
abortion I could find, every single book. And
Wow.
that was one that really made a difference for me. I have a 15-week study that's based on the 12 steps.
Awesome.
Um, the 12 steps, again, for your listeners who aren't aware, it's the 12 steps are based on the gospel, right?
Yeah.
They're the teachings of Christ. So I figured they got to work. And nobody had ever done the 12 steps of abortion, but that is a 15-week study. I have pregnancy centers that use it in person. I've done it virtually. I've done it one-on-one with guys. Um, but there's a lot of stuff out there that is not really strongly biblically based, doesn't have that strong biblical foundation. And I would just encourage any of your listeners, male or female, that are looking at post-abortion healing to watch out. To watch out for the um, soft language, right?
Mm.
Our Lord said, "You were lukewarm, and I spit you out of my mouth."
Yeah.
So we're not trying to browbeat people that may be wrong church like I was with the gospel, but by the same token, they do need to have the truth in their healing journey.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's the truth that will set us free, right? So,
Right.
bringing
And I
that
would
to
say,
light.
don't be afraid to read any book. If it's about
Mm.
men and abortion, like I read every one of them, and some of them I discarded, and some of them I shared with people. Right? Um,
Yeah.
you're going to take as you move through this journey of healing. You're going to have missteps. You're going to have days where it feels like you're going backwards. But something cool is going to happen too, Lauren. You're going to get to days where you're like, man, I'm really starting to feel better. And then God's going to show
Mm.
you other things you need to heal. For me, it was high functioning anxiety. When my
Yeah.
therapist told me that about a year into my abortion healing, I was like, explain what that means. And he explained it. And I said, oh, everybody just doesn't walk around like that all day. and
Yeah.
and one of the most important things, and I know I'm kind of rambling about this, but it's super important, is that as you get to a place in your healing journey, and you'll know because you'll be praying every day and God will tell you, but then find a place to plug in, find a place to join
Mm.
me and Lauren and everybody else that's in this movement and
Yeah.
do some good. Let God find purpose in your pain.
Yeah. Oh, that's so powerful. It's been so healing for so many of our sidewalk advocates, who have experienced abortion and have walked through the journey of healing and said, you know what, now I want to go help other people. And just going to the sidewalk and being there for a mom and helping to save a baby, it's just been so restorative for them as well. That's so true. Greg, one more question. If someone is on the receiving end of, some of that news. In other words, a friend or family member comes to them and says, I've had an abortion experience and I want to tell you about it. How can we be the best listeners and agents of healing when someone brings that to us?
Oh, that's a great question because abortion is a stone thrown in a pond, right? I mean, it ripples out
Mm.
through a lot of different lives. So the first thing I would say, unequivocally, the first thing, drop whatever judgment you have.
Yeah.
Um, don't, well, they're living sinful, they're doing this. No, push all that aside. Have compassion. The second
Yeah.
thing is you can't fix it. Don't try
Mm.
to fix it. I don't care if you're a licensed therapist who specializes in abortion healing. If it's your son, your daughter, your cousin, your brother, brother-in-law, whatever that comes to you with this, you can't fix it. But you can listen with compassion. You can offer to walk with them. Not
Yeah.
that you have any answers, you may not, but you can offer to walk with them. Well, man, I heard about this healing group at the church. Yeah, I'm kind of nervous about going. Do you want me to go with you? Well, you don't have an abortion
Mm.
story. That's okay. You're my brother. You're my friend. You're my whatever.
Mhm.
It sometimes, and I
Oh,
look at the example set by Job's friends, at least in the beginning, um, where they just sat with him in silence. I had a friend of mine who I've known for a long time. When all this started happening, right when the book came out and all the things, we were sitting on my bass boat, and he was facing one direction, and I was facing the other, like you do on a bass boat. And he told me, without turning around and looking at me, his abortion story. He had never shared it with anybody. And I said, I'm sorry for your loss, brother. Can I pray for you quick? He said, absolutely. And I prayed for him. I said, do you want to share any more about that? Lauren, he didn't say anything for about 15 minutes. And you know what I did? I let the silence sit there.
wow.
It's important to have that kind of patience because when it's someone we care about, our initial instinct and reaction is, oh my gosh, somebody I love is hurting. Let me fix it. Don't fix
Yeah.
it. Sit with them, ask questions, ask how they would like you to help them, and just offer to walk with them. Not because you're an expert, but because you love them and care about them and you want them to have fully restored relationship with Jesus.
That's beautiful. If someone starts to share, but then they're kind of pushing you away and pushing things away, do you think that there's a role in kind of trying to reopen the conversation or plant seeds? And how would you do that?
So I use what's called the 4x4 question method. I actually learned it in sales training like 25 years ago, but it turns out it works for everything. But it's simple. You ask them a question, and a kind of a softball, frankly, but you ask them a question to get an answer. And then whatever they answer you, that informs your next question.
Yeah.
We do that. I teach that to pregnancy resource center staff when the guy comes in and she's getting the ultrasound and he's all clammed up, right? Don't ask him. First of all, don't ask him, how do you feel? Because guys will be like, what do you, no, nothing. But you,
I'm in my nothing box right
right.
now. Yeah. I want to be in the nothing box. Yeah. Yeah.
But ask a man how what he thinks about a situation, and he'll start to problem solve, which is his comfort zone. So you use that question method even with your bestie, and you ask them a question and they answer, and then that informs the next question. And almost without fail, almost consistently, within 4 or 5 questions, you'll be at kind of the root of what's really going on. But that's how you do it. You don't push them, you encourage them, and there's a huge difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, and I have a guy who I've been, uh, my rock has been skipping across the top of his pond for about 3 years now. Um, he'll reach out and we'll talk a little bit, or maybe I'll send him a text and he'll respond and we'll talk a little bit for a few days, and then I don't hear from him for a few months, but I still keep skipping that rock, right?
Yeah.
Because eventually he's going to be in a place to receive what I want to share.
Yeah.
But I have to
Yeah.
earn that, right? I can't just dump on him what I think he needs to know.
Yeah. So, I want to ask a follow up question. This is so fascinating to me. Sometimes when we meet these fathers, I have been surprised how many will open up to us. I think because we're so peaceful and friendly and we're
Hmm.
offering free help and all of that. So that definitely breaks the ice in and of itself. We're handing out these gift bags, they're full of candy and good stuff, right? Scary protesters don't give people gift bags. So it really
Right.
helps them to know that we're the safe people, right? But if we do have a father who's clamming up, can you give an example of the 4x4? So you said ask a question and then that informs the next question, but do it kind of more from a thinking perspective rather than a feeling perspective, right? Do I have that right?
Yeah. So I'll give you a really good example. I use this all the time with pregnancy centers. Guy comes in and he's sitting there, and everything about his body language says, "Leave me alone. I don't want to talk to you."
Yeah.
So you sit down. So that's your girlfriend that just went back here? Yeah, yeah, yeah. So what do you think about all this? Man, dude, I don't know. I didn't think I'd be here. That's for sure. Yeah, no, I get that. It's kind of a surprise, right? Yeah, dude, total surprise. So what if she's pregnant? Man, I don't know. I don't know. It's really not up to me, isn't it? If she's pregnant, you're already a dad. The baby just hadn't been born yet. So what do you think? Man, I don't know. I don't know if I can be a dad. Well, why not? And there's no
Mm,
instruction manual. You kind of figure it out as you go. Trust me, I raised 4 kids. Haha, and you kind of laugh. And number one, that gives you credibility. You share just a nugget about yourself. You don't share too much. You don't overshare. Share a little nugget.
yeah.
I raised 4 kids. All 4 of my kids are still walking around, not bumping into stuff, so they must be okay. But and then, well, my dad was nobody's bargain. He was an alcoholic. He left. He beat me. He this. He that. Whatever. Well, you know what? This pregnancy center has fatherhood classes. It ain't just about changing diapers, brother, but they'll help you understand a little bit more about how to be a dad in a healthy way and raise a healthy child. That could be kind of cool, right? No cost. And if you go, like, you get free stuff for the baby. I mean, that could be cool. Yeah, no, I guess that'd be cool. But yeah, I mean, dude, like, I work at Starbucks 30 hours a week. Like, I can't even afford it. Oh, you ever thought about plumbing? What? Plumbing. You can make 6 figures in 4 years if you're a plumber or an HVAC tech or an electrician. So that's the way you do it. Real easy, right?
Yeah, yeah. I love that. No, I love that, right? Because and especially as women, we think that we go in there, "How do you feel?" Right? And some of
Right.
these dudes are like, "Whoa, the feeling thing just came at me right away," right? But if you get them thinking, it's interesting to me how they walk themselves into how they feel about it, and they start wrestling with it and, like you said, problem solving, right? And you're
Yep.
just picking up on what you hear, sometimes reflecting back, inviting more of a response. But I mean, this is why listening is so critical, because it also offers to you the objections, which then we're able to help them to see that there are solutions, right? Making suggestions based on maybe what's been helpful for us, what's available to them. And that's what we do as sidewalk advocates as well, is we are the resource gatherers and the connectors where the paramedics arriving to the scene. We want to get them to the hospital, get them to the pregnancy center. Of course, the ultimate hospital is Jesus Christ, but the body of Christ is in these pregnancy centers,
Right.
right? So, so beautiful. Well, this has been such a fascinating conversation, Greg. I'm so grateful for your witness. If people want to talk with you, connect more with you, can you give us all the things, website, books? We'd love to get a rundown from you.
Yeah. So go to almostdaddy.com.
Mm.
Or go to gregmayoauthor.com. There's a contact button. My email's on there. I try to keep it simple, Lauren. It's Greg at almostdaddy.com. I wanted to use me at almostdaddy.com, and my wife didn't think that was nearly as funny as I did. But yeah, go to the website, reach out. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram, but I'm willing to have a conversation with anybody about this. And what I tell
Mm.
people all the time is I may not have all the answers, but I can tell you what I've learned through my journey and what I think I know today. And
Yeah.
if nothing else,
Mhm.
I can just listen and I can pray with you if you want. Um, but there's Almost Daddy, the Forgotten Story. There's also Almost Daddy, a Men's Guide to Healing After Abortion. And then I wrote another book on childhood issues called Unraveled Roots for Men, um,
Mm.
which I wrote 2 years ago that was actually published by an organization called Support After Abortion. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, reach out, listen to the audiobook. It's me. You can hear me read a book to you. How much fun is that? But I understand, and I want to make this clear to anybody listening that's thinking, maybe I'll reach out to this dude. Reach out. If you're thinking, I'm not sure what to say or how to say it or what to even ask, I don't care. Reach out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, we'll have a conversation and we'll just see where it goes. We don't have to decide that right away. But if you're
Yeah.
feeling some stirring, if you're feeling like you want to get involved in the movement in some kind of way, maybe you're a guy that's had some kind of healing and you're trying to figure out next steps, just reach out. Let's just chat. We'll
Yeah.
figure it out.
Yeah.
And if you're in
I
the
love that.
Indianapolis area, we'll grab a cup of coffee and a piece of pie and figure it out.
I love that. That's a great pitch right there. So, oh, so good. Greg, thank you. Thank you for your witness. And I just love hearing what the Lord has done in your life. And you would have every right to kind of be like, all right, I walked this journey and I'm going to go live a quiet life. And now you're turning around and helping other people. And there's just nothing like it. It's really awesome. So keep up the great work. And thank you, brother, for all that you're doing.
Thanks, Lauren. It was a true blessing to be here today. Thank you so much.
Yes, absolutely. Great to have you. Thanks, Greg. Oh, so good. You know, as I shared before on an earlier episode, I have a male cousin who years ago tried to commit suicide on the due date of one of his babies after his girlfriend aborted two of their children. Thankfully, the suicide attempt failed. He and his girlfriend did go on to have a baby girl, a cousin that I finally got to meet a handful of years ago. And so many times I've gone to the sidewalk in front of an abortion facility to offer help and hope to the women and men who are going in. And inevitably, people ask me, "Why are you here?" And the first thing I usually mention is my cousin, my male cousin, because I knew the grief over the loss of his two children. And I saw how it affected my family, my aunt, my mom, right? And I never wanted anybody else to go through that. I wanted people to know that they had options and resources and that abortion affects more than just women, it impacts a family. And I really want to encourage the women who are listening to this broadcast to do their part in helping the culture understand that we want men in this battle with us. And more than that, we need them. They are affected by abortion as well. They have a unique perspective from us women simply because they're men. And yes, I challenge anybody who says that there aren't inherent differences between women and men. We can learn from each other. We complement each other. We need each other. It's actually part of a genius design from our creator that works together for human flourishing. So let's do our part, ladies, in encouraging the men around us to speak up. If nothing else, we need them to reach out to other men and help them understand the incredible value of life and family and what it means to protect and defend the most vulnerable among us. With that, thank you again so much for joining me for another episode of the Lauren Musica Show. We'll be back here next Friday at 9 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Central on the Sidewalk Advocates for Life Facebook page, YouTube channel, or wherever you get podcasts. Thanks so much, everybody.